over to Jason.
All right. Marinelle, thank you. Well, guys, good morning. As Marinelle and I look outside the window, first and foremost, for anyone that's been impacted by the recent flooding, I hope things are getting better. But definitely we're thinking about all those areas that have been impacted by the recent flooding. But it's great to see a blue sky, and that means it's a great day to talk about after the FAFSA, right, Marinelle?
That's right.
All right. So thank you. I think right now there's 44 of you on this webinar, which is great. For some of you that perhaps have listened to several of our webinars this year, Marinelle and I was talking as we were planning for the After the FAFSA webinar, somewhat going over some of the same things we did in one of the webinars we did last in the fall. So for some of you, some of these slides might be somewhat the same that you may have heard or seen me present about in the fall. But you know what, folks, that's been 4 or 5 months ago, so it might be a good refresher for everyone. So let's begin in terms of, so here we are. We're after the Tennessee Promise and TSA FAFSA deadline, which might be a good place to start by simply saying this. That doesn't mean the FAFSA has closed. For any of our students that have still yet to fill out the FAFSA but are planning to go to college, remember, they can still do it for Pell Grant purposes, for the Hope Scholarship, for Wilder NAFI. And so, in other words, there's a lot of programs and a lot of financial aid that still is connected to the FAFSA, and that's something that as we dive in and say look at reports, and that's where we're going to begin here, is by looking at the FAFSA by high school report, is kind of as a reminder, if you have a student that's not submitted the FAFSA, we still would like for that student to submit that FAFSA so that he or she may qualify for, again, Pell, Hope, Wilder NAFI, etc. So in order to access the FAFSA by high school report, that's where we're going to start here. It's accessible by going to eGrants. If you go to our tn.gov/collegepays website, which recently has had a facelift, so definitely check it out if you've not seen it. There's been a facelift for tn.gov/collegepays. But when you get to the site, if you scroll to the bottom under important links, there you'll see the eGrants user access link where individuals can now log into eGrants. I think it's appropriate here to say for those counselors that may not have eGrants access, you can contact your TSAC outreach specialist. You can contact me, and we can send you the paperwork. Basically, it's a one-page sheet that you'll have to have your principal to sign off on to allow us to create an eGrants account for you. But once you get to eGrants and you log in with your username, once you're in the actual site, to download that FAFSA by high school report, if you click on New Reports, and then click on FAFSA by high school, that will open up this new window. And so to display your current high school seniors, status as it pertains to FAFSA, you'll select the 1920 academic year because that is the FAFSA year that they have been completing for FAFSA purposes. Again, that does not align with the current academic year, but it aligns with what FAFSA that they have done or will be doing for those that have not done it. And then also they'll select their grad year, which obviously 2019 for those that are graduating this May. You'll click View Report, and then once it displays, you'll then click that little diskette to save the report or open and save the report in whatever format you please. This is an example of the FAFSA by high school report, and there are going to be 3 things that we're going to dive into that you see highlighted here. But I want to first begin with a 4th thing that you see highlighted towards the bottom left-hand corner, which at the end of the report, just a summary letting you know how many FAFSAs have been submitted at your school. how many of those FAFSAs have a blank EFC, which we'll talk about here momentarily, how many of those FAFSAs have been selected for verification. Again, we'll talk about that momentarily. And then finally, how many of those FAFSAs have a matching Tennessee Promise application. So that's just something to share with you. If you look at the report at the very bottom, kind of a summary of those things. Again, your total 1920 FAFSA count, the total number of blank EFCs of the records that are listed on the report, a total number of who's been selected for FAFSA verification, and finally, a total number of Tennessee Promise applications based upon these students. All right, the other three highlighted areas, the institution name, the blank EFC, and the FAFSA verification, we will get into momentarily. That said, I think, Marinelle, you and I have had this discussion now for years, and you know this issue with the FAFSA by high school report, but it's a good place to just include this right here. A student should appear on the FAFSA by high school report if the following two things are true. One, the student has submitted a 1920 FAFSA, and two, the student's FAFSA has connected with his or her ACT test record by a matching Social Security number in eGrants. And notice I have underlined and bolded this. For most schools, when a counselor emails or calls and says, Jason, I am missing such and such from my FAFSA by high school report. In most cases, the issue is that student's FAFSA is not connected with his or her ACT or SAT in eGrants by a matching social. Because again, understand, folks, you know, ACT, SAT no longer requires Social Security numbers. So every record, ACT, SAT record that come in, you know, it just basically sits there until someone updates that record with a social. Now, thankfully, our system is doing that, trying to do that automatically. But one thing that we see with these ACT test records, student uses a different name or a different spelling on the test versus the FAFSA. Student reports their date of birth incorrectly on that ACT or SAT test record versus the FAFSA. And these little small errors, which are definitely correctable and something we can definitely correct in our system if someone alerts us to them, you know, that does not allow these records to automatically connect. Because if a date of birth is wrong, or if for example, and Marinelle, I'm going to use your name if I may, like, you know, if Mary Nell submitted her FAFSA as Mary Nell and her last name, and then when she took the ACT, if she just indicated Mary and her last name without putting Mary Nell, that's not going to automatically connect because our system's like, whoa, these are two different people. And that's when the human element must step in, and a human must then marry these records or update these records. So if you do find that a student is missing from your FAFSA by high school report, is there something you can do? Well, absolutely. You got two options. One, as a counselor, you do have the ability via eGrants to search for, update, and even add ACT test records into eGrants. And in most cases, the records should be there. You may just see that something other than the Social Security number is displayed, and that's something that you could update within eGrants on an ACT test record. Marinelle, if we will, when we post this webinar and this PowerPoint, I also have like a little one-pager that talks about updating the social for ACT record purposes in eGrants. Let's post that with it as well. For some of you, as I say that, some of you are going to be like, Jason, there's no way I'm going to be doing that, right? And I've heard that before, and that's okay. Your second option, obviously, would be contact your TSAC outreach specialist and just say, hey, I have these 5 students that are missing from the report. Go, to help me make them appear on the report, and that's when we'll do the troubleshooting on our end as well. So to me, those are your two options for students that are missing on that FAFSA by high school report to get them added.
We do have one question as we go. So just a point of clarification, the FAFSA app is connected to the ACT, SAT test?
So again, specifically in eGrants, all right, specifically in our system, which we use to administer all of our state financial aid purposes. And again, in order for a student to appear on this FAFSA by high school report, all right, when TSAC receives that student's FAFSA record, okay, what the system looks for is an ACT or an SAT test record that should already be in the system as well that matches the information on the FAFSA. As long as the information matches, meaning name and date of birth matches, then eGrants will automatically update that student's social on the test record. If something does not match, if a name's misspelled, or if date of birth is wrong, that's when, again, I need to update something, or as a counselor, you might need to update within eGrants. So that's it right there. There's that.
We also have a question if the Q&As can be posted after this webinar. I think I can keep track of all of the questions, and then we can write out the answers later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Guys, great question, and keep those coming. Mary Nell and I both said this is a lot of this webinar is probably going to be Q&A driven, I guess we should say. So let's dive into the report. So on that FAFSA by high school report, those three areas, to me as a counselor, that you might want to look into more. First, there's that blank EFC column, right? EFC, that's the expected family contribution. If a student's FAFSA was submitted correctly, then an EFC should have generated. However, if there's an error on the FAFSA, this will result into what we call a blank EFC, meaning one that's not generated. So if you're looking at that FAFSA by high school report, if you look at the blank EFC column, if you see a yes means the student's FAFSA has some sort of error, all right? Examples, the student's signature is missing, the parent's signature, and obviously we're talking an electronic signature for most of our parents and students, that's missing. Other potential errors, the parent's adjusted gross income, which may have been manually entered because he or she was unable to use the data retrieval because he or she's having username and password issues. Maybe they entered the adjusted gross income as being the same as the income tax paid. Another potential error is the students' and parents' incomes were reported the same, though sometimes that's caught and sometimes it's not caught by FAFSA. But again, it's some error, and that's what's causing this EFC not to generate. So again, you're looking for a yes here.
We got another question.
Yes.
What do I need to do if I have a student whose name is not matching with the name that the Social Security Administration has for them?
So, Mary Nell, as I'm looking at this, is this Anna Claire asking this?
It is, yes.
So, Anna Claire, this might be one you and I have to troubleshoot, perhaps. But it's a good question for me to at least address this. As a counselor, you can update Social Security numbers within the update test functionality. You can even add a test record that may not appear for a student under update test, under the update test functionality of eGrants. However, names, I believe, are grayed out on your end as a high school user, which means if their name is incorrect, Anna Claire, that's something I think I have to update. Or another outreach specialist can update. So what I would do, I would at least update the social if it needs to be updated, and then if there's a name issue, then send me or an outreach specialist or any other TSAC person that you contact and have them update the name is what I would do, or at least look more into that name. Good question, Anna Claire. Anything else?
Yes, one more. So my students with blank EFCs had to choose the option to mail in their signature page because of issues with signing electronically. Mm-hmm. Where do they do this in the portal to print this page and mail it?
So that would be, so good question. So this would be this would be from a FAFSA perspective. I'm going to move on just for a second. We'll come back to this blank EFC. Mary, if you will, click on the left-hand screen. Oh, you're good. All right. No, this is good. So on this actually next page, so Jenna, if I need a student to now submit a signature page, if that's what you're asking, and for some reason, right, either the signature page, and this happens, folks, remember, it can take up to 6 weeks for a signature page to process. And in some instances, I've actually worked with a few students at some of the localized schools that did a signature page back in October, November, and they still haven't processed. And so I actually, back in January, had them to submit another signature page. To get back to that signature page, the student would return to the FAFSA, and here's kind of a screenshot of what that My FAFSA page looks like. If they're still lacking signatures, Janet, there should be a Provide Signatures button that would be shown. Like on this screenshot, if you're following me, like above this, you see what happens next. Above the what happens next would be like this button that says Provide Signatures. They would click the Provide Signatures button, and then they would follow those prompts to ultimately either A, if they've resolved their username password issue, then they can electronically sign at this point. On the other hand, if they still need to submit a signature page, they can find that option there as well. And again, but they'll start by clicking the Provide Signature option and then follow the prompts from there. And kind of as a reminder for everyone, especially our students, you know, if they are citizens or if they are permanent residents and they have socials, you know, they obviously need username passwords. Now, guys, let's face it, a lot of these students, well, we help them create username passwords, and guess what they have since done? They have forgot them or they lost them. And unfortunately, they didn't set up their email to verify or their mobile number to verify. And so now they're at this place where they have to answer their challenge questions. Well, guess what? They can't do that now. If they're running into this issue, they need to call FAFSA, 1-800-4FED-AID. It's funny. It's been 4 weeks since I last kind of touched the FAFSA or did a FAFSA workshop. I've already forgot what that number spells out to. I think it's 433-3243, 1-800-433-3243. You know, they've got to resolve that username password. Now, Jenna, they can obviously submit a signature page again, but at some point they really need to resolve that signature page or that username password issue for FAFSA so that they can electronically sign and not have to, you know, do the signature page option every time and have to wait almost 6 weeks between time each time. Click on it.
Yeah,
left hand. No, you're good. You're good. I'm going to go back to just say this. Back to the blank EFC column. If they do have a blank EFC, my broad answer is, Jason, what should be done at this point? Have the student return to FAFSA, log in, and then click View or Print Student Aid Report. And they need to read page 1 of that Student Aid Report to ascertain the issue. I think Jana's question was appropriate and was perfect timing, because in some of these issues, it may just be a signature issue that just needs resolution. And so it was great to do that at that time. Again, back to the My FAFSA page screen. Once that student logs on, towards the bottom of the screen is where they will find View or Print their Student Aid Report. By clicking that View or Print your Student Aid Report, and if they did log in with their username and password, they will then see this. This is a sample of what a Student Aid Report looks like. And again, this is a sample of what that page 1 would look like. They're going to have to read this, folks. And by reading this, page 1, maybe sometimes even the page 2, that will let them know what errors are if it's something beyond the signature. Mm-hmm. Folks, if it's a signature issue, then more than likely, as they log in back to this screenshot, right above it, it would say Provide Signatures. More than likely, that's the issue that needs resolution in this case. But if it's something else, again, definitely read page 1 of the student aid report to ascertain the issue, and then go from there in terms of what needs to be fixed or updated or corrected in this matter. The other thing, as I segue now from blank EFC to FAFSA verification, just FYI, as it relates to FAFSA verification, one way for a student to figure out that he or she has been selected for FAFSA verification is at the top of the student aid report sample where you see EFC, and then you see the number. In this case, the student's EFC is 1702. There's an asterisk by that 1702. We have it yellow highlighted. What that asterisk means is that student's FAFSA has been selected for verification. So if you look in the writing below, if you look at, if we're counting paragraphs, under comments about your information, 1, 2, that third paragraph that begins, your FAFSA has been selected for a review process called verification, that is the, I guess, confirmation in this case that asterisk means that student's FAFSA has been selected for verification. Thankfully, on that FAFSA by high school report, we have included a column that says FAFSA verification. And this lets you know which of your students have been selected at this time for that verification process. Again, yes means the student's FAFSA has been selected for verification. At that point, what should you encourage the student to do? Well, I would have the student to check her email, and this perhaps should be what many of the students will need to do, is to log in to his or her prospective college's portal to review what's actually needed to satisfy the verification process. So if you're working with a student who's looking to go into MTSU, I would have that student to log into the, I don't know if it's called now MT Pipeline or whether it's called Blue Raider account, but whatever it's called, that's what we need that student to log into. And within it, it will, there will be a section for them to complete the verification process, which outlines a checklist of here's what we need from that parent and student to satisfy this process. Back to the email. Oftentimes this checklist is also emailed to the student as well. The problem is sometimes, and why I said earlier it might be best for them to log in their account, is oftentimes I've looked at students' emails before. I'm sure you have as well, and sometimes it's hard to wade through all the email to get to the email that I'm looking for that may say from a Nashville State or a UT Knoxville or a Union University that, hey, Jason, you've been selected for verification. So I think if the email cannot be found, I think the go-to is have that student to log into the portal account, which in itself can be a challenge because, Marinelle, you and I hear from a lot of students, well, I don't know my login for that. Well, again, they may end up having to contact the college to ask, what is my login, or what are the instructions for creating the login, and stuff like that. So that's from a FAFSA verification perspective as well.
Is it correct that if a student is selected for verification, he or she will have to provide documents to each of the colleges to which he or she has sent the FAFSA, and each college may ask for different materials?
So yes, colleges, that process can vary by college. But in terms of, this is Gail's question, right?
Jackie.
Oh, Jackie, I'm sorry. Sorry. Jackie, great question. Jackie, what I would say is that if I'm a student and I've applied to several different colleges and I'm still in that decision-making phase, then to the first part of your question, must I complete the process for each of those colleges? The answer is yes, especially if completing that process is what's going to determine my eligibility for aid, right? If that college is withholding money or potential money from my package because verification's not been not been satisfied. Specifically, I'm taking this from an institutional perspective. If that institution is potentially withholding institutional aid from my award package because I need to satisfy a verification, that's an example of why it might behoove me to satisfy that process at multiple schools just so that I can compare apples to apples prior to making my ultimate college decision. On the other hand, if I've decided I am going to the University of Memphis and that's it, then that's the only school I need to satisfy verification with, if that's where I've now decided as of February the 26th that's where I'm going. That's the only school I would need to do the process for. That said, if we get to April 15th and I've made my decision, well, guess what, Jackie? I think this is maybe another way you're posing this question is, on April 15th, if I made the decision now to attend Christian Brothers, let's say, now I've got to do that verification process with CBU. So yes, ultimately, wherever I go to college, I've got to satisfy verification with that college, okay? The second part about materials. So most colleges require the student and parent to complete a verification worksheet. And then from a tax perspective, that's where either the data retrieval tool ideally is used to satisfy that second part of verification. But in lieu of being able to use data retrieval, like let's say for a family that's unable to use it, that's where that student and or parent would either A, need to request tax transcripts, or B, and this is why we're doing this. This is another reason why Marinelle and I are doing this webinar is, guys, right during the partial government shutdown back in December, January, federal student aid issued a policy to all the financial aid offices to say, due to the partial government shutdown, that if a student was unable to use data retrieval or unable to get their tax transcripts directly from the IRS, that they could turn in copies of tax documents to satisfy that verification requirement. Jackie, I give you this, and everyone, I give you this example to say the following. I and you cannot control what that college ultimately asks for. Now, all those colleges received that guidance from federal student aid saying that it's okay for the 1819 and 1920 FAFSA cycles to receive the copies of a signed tax return in lieu of retrieval or a tax transcript. But, Jackie, I would say there are some colleges that either A, may have missed on that, reading that policy update, or they may have chosen to ignore it, and they may still require that student to either do the tax transcript or the data retrieval to satisfy verification. So I think that's where you see some differences is a financial aid office's the interpretation of the process. Right? There are some interpretation differences in what's required. But again, to kind of simplify it for all of us on this webinar, to me, usually there's two components of verification. One, the worksheet, which is pretty self-explanatory, that each college generally will have through their portal account for the student to either complete online. More and more schools are going to the online worksheet, or that they'll print and manually complete. And the second component is the validation of that income, whether it's through data retrieval, whether it's through a tax transcript, whether it's through the copies of the tax return, or fourth and finally, for those that do not file, whether that's a signed statement that says, I, Jason C., did not file taxes for the 2017 tax year because I was unemployed the entire year. That's generally the two components of the verification process.
We got one more that relates to this topic as well. What if the retrieval tool was used, but the student is still asked to verify?
So, if there is a discrepancy, so from a financial aid perspective, they'll be able to see that the student was able to use data retrieval. But just because you use data retrieval does not exempt you from verification. So that's one way to tackle this question. Again, let's be clear, folks. Verification is still a random selection. And 33% of all FAFSAs, that is quote unquote the number that FSA always presents to us during our financial aid conference, that 33% of all FAFSAs are randomly selected for this process. Again, let's be clear. Just because a parent or student uses data retrieval, that does not exempt them from the process because it's a random selection. Now, that said, so if I use data retrieval and if I was selected for verification, most of the verification processes I've seen, as you complete that worksheet, that part 2 will be about income validation, and it will be asked. It will say, it's like, Jason or Jason's parent, how will you validate your income information? And one of the options is through data retrieval. So if I use data retrieval, I would just simply check that box, and that would satisfy it. I would not have to necessarily do anything more unless that college comes back and asks for more. For example, if they ask for copies of my parents and my W-2s, at that point in time, I will need to provide them that. But if I use data retrieval, that technically should satisfy the second part of verification that I would indicate on the verification worksheet. Great question. All right. So third and final part of the FAFSA report that I just wanted to highlight. So again, we've covered blank EFCs. Again, you're looking for yeses to identify issues, and then just tell the student, hey, you've got an issue, go back and log in, and that's how you'll determine what your issue may be. FAFSA verification, again, yes. If it's yes, you've been selected verification. Students, those of you selected verification, you need to follow up with the college, log into their portal account. You and your parents need to go through that process. The third and final part of the FAFSA report is the institutional name column. What you'll see in this column is the Tennessee college where the student state aid is earmarked for at this present time, okay? So if you download your report and if Jason Seay says the college is University of Tennessee Chattanooga, that means Jason's TSEA, the Hope Scholarship, anything he or she's eligible for from a state perspective would be earmarked for UT Chattanooga, all right? So as you look at this report, and as you look at these colleges, if the Tennessee college listed is no longer where that student will be attending this fall, this is when you need to have that student to go log in to his or her TSAC student portal account and update the student's college, okay? And the next slide will begin the process of showing, so TSAC student portal, tn.gov/TSAC student portal.
Could you hit on that one more time? We did have a question asking to clarify how to log into the student portal and also to eGrants.
Yeah.
We can circle back to eGrants, but just hit on that one more time.
So again, for the TSAC student portal, you see the website below if you're following along. If not, you'll see these slides later. Mm-hmm. But they can go directly by typing in www.tn.gov/TSAC student portal. That will take them to the screen where the student logs in. They would log in, assuming most of these students complete the Tennessee Promise process. They would have created a TSAC student portal account to do that. They will log in with whatever username and password they created. Then in the fall, when they signed up for Tennessee Promise, once they log in, well, I should pause here to say, if they forgot their username and password, they can click on underneath the login button, create a login button. There's a forgot username or password. They can click on either to help with remembering those things. Mm-hmm. And then, as always, last but not least, if the student's unable to log in for whatever reason, they can always call the TSAC 1-800 number to have someone assist them with their login at that point in time. So once they've logged in, the first screen they come to will display their financial aid summary for the 1920 academic year. So here's a screenshot that shows this particular student, their Hope Scholarship, Hope Access, TSA, all their state aid in this case is earmarked for Nashville State Community College. So if I'm no longer attending Nashville State this fall, then that's when the student they'll have the option beside each of those state aid programs. There's that transfer school button that you see here. I just need them to click one transfer school button. So when they click the transfer school button, they'll come to this process school transfer request screen. They will select the school that they would like that they will be attending. That will then transfer their state aid from, again, my example, Nashville State, to, in this case, Columbia State. All right. Once they select Columbia State from the drop-down menu and click Process Transfer Request, now all of their state aid eligibility will be earmarked for Columbia State. So here is a question I've been asked several times this month. Must a student's college ultimately be number one on the student's FAFSA? The answer is no. Several years ago, federal student aid began randomizing school codes on the FAFSA. Each college listed will receive the student's FAFSA. However, the college will only see that the student listed it and no other school. So, for example, if I put on my FAFSA Western Kentucky and Middle Tennessee State University, okay? Western will receive my FAFSA, Middle will receive my FAFSA. However, those two schools will not see that I put the other school on my FAFSA. That started several years ago. One of our colleagues, Mary Nell, and I don't think he's on, but I think some of his our colleagues as well are on, but Dwayne, Greg asked this question a few weeks ago because apparently, and some of you that are listening, and I was going through this, you may be like, now, Jason, but such and such college is da-da-da-da. I know for a fact that UT Knoxville on its website will say, or is saying, your college must be number one on the FAFSA, or UTK must be number one on the FAFSA, I should say. Folks, again, I've not followed up with UTK about this, but here is my assumption. All these state schools, all these Tennessee colleges, right, they have to administer the Hope Scholarship, they have to administer TSCA and all that good stuff, right? If that college has you to put them number one on FAFSA, like when you initially submit it, well, guess what? That locks your state aid in for that school, right? And so in other words, you don't have to go back and change anything else if that's ultimately where you're going. And so that's one less step that a UTK, if they're telling all their prospective students, make sure we're number one on the FAFSA, that's one less thing that they have to say to Tennesseans or have to tell to go back in to update your school through the TSAC student portal. But folks, you know, our students are putting whatever school they want. And again, listen to what I just went through to say. Back to that report. If you see, Mary, now if you will, click on the left-hand screen.
Yep.
No, you're good. You're good. If you see on that report, I'm going back through the slides. I'm sorry. If you see your list of students here and their respective colleges that their state aid is earmarked for, let's be very clear again. The only thing I need them to do from a TSAC perspective, all right, is if they're going to another Tennessee college, I need them to go into their TSAC student portal account and I need them to update where their money is going through that TSAC student portal account. That's what we need to make sure is done. I do not need that school to be reflected as number one on the FAFSA. I do not, because it's irrelevant now based on what federal student aid has done with the randomization of school codes. That leads me to one other comment, and then we probably have a question or two. The comment is this. The only time I should be going back to my FAFSA and adding a school or something like that is if the school I'm going to in the fall was not entered on my FAFSA, okay? So let's say on my initial FAFSA, I put WKU and I put Middle Tennessee State University, and those are the only two schools I listed. But now I'm going to Vol State Community College. Well, at that point in time, this would be an example. If I never put Vol State on my FAFSA, I would, A, have to return to FAFSA, add Vol State, and B, also return to the TSAC student portal and update my state aid to Vol State. I would have to do that. So I want to leave it here for a second. Marianelle, question?
Okay, so we have two questions.
Okay.
The first is, why would an institution be missing on the eGrants report?
Because this is a great question. So if you're telling me it's blank, so if you're seeing Jason C. and there's nothing listed in that institution name column, that means this student only entered out-of-state colleges on the FAFSA. So we have no Tennessee college to put in this box, because again, that institution name column, I guess we really should put it as the Tennessee institution name column. So again, if you've got Jason C. and under institution column, there's nothing in it for the college, that means Jason only indicated out-of-state colleges. And if Jason's going to an out-of-state college, he's good, right? He's absolutely good. But this is a great question for that last example I gave. However, if Jason now is going to attend a Tennessee college, we now need Jason to do two things. We need him to return to the FAFSA and add that Tennessee college he's attending, because it never was entered on any of the other FAFSAs. And B, we would need that Jason, even though, now listen to me carefully, even though he's added that Tennessee college, because we lock in that initial college, the initial colleges from that FAFSA that was submitted at the beginning of the FAFSA cycle, I would also need Jason to go back into the TSAC student portal and also select the correct Tennessee college there as well. So that's the answer to that question.
Great. Your second question is, in the TSAC portal, can the student have a community college listed for the Promise, but a university listed for Hope?
So the answer is, at this point in time, is this Jackie that's asking this question? So Jackie, great question. Jackie, give me grace here in case I'm mistaken. But once the FAFSA has been submitted, and once the FAFSA and basically the Promise records all connect, the Tennessee college that was entered, that appeared first on the list of that student's FAFSA schools, that will then trump whatever is listed on the Promise application. So Jackie, the answer to your question should be, at that point in time, once TSAC receives that student's FAFSA, it's going to reflect whatever college the student listed, or whatever Tennessee college the student listed first on his or her FAFSA. That will trump whatever was reported initially on the Tennessee Promise application. So in other words, there should not be a discrepancy at that point in time. In other words, my Hope Access, my TSCA, my Water NACI, and my Tennessee Promise, all those programs, like on that screenshot right here that I just went back to, all those in this example should reflect National State. Or if I was a student that put Vanderbilt first on my FAFSA, all those should now reflect Vanderbilt. In other words, Promise, whatever I list on my Promise app should be trumped by whatever was first listed on the FAFSA. So that all should align at that point in time. Good question.
That's it.
All right. So final 16 minutes or so, just a couple of state aid updates, because these are great questions, and the questions I'm sure students are coming to you with as well. And like I said, I thought this was a great time to kind of rehash some of this stuff. Let's talk about TSCA, our Tennessee Student Assistance Award. Priority eligibility was based upon the FAFSA submission of February 1st. Let's be clear, folks. As long as that student submitted the FAFSA by February 1st, and as long as the eligible EFC was generated, eligible EFC being for TSCA is 0 to 2100, that student should eventually become TSAA eligible. Okay. Now, awarding should begin in about a week or so, in March. That's when awarding should begin. So what students should begin seeing is currently awards messaging will say eligible pending funds availability. What we should start seeing in the next week or two is those being updated to now reflect eligible awardee. And so that will then that will let the student know I in fact am eligible for TSCA. The second thing, just a reminder about TSA, is TSA priority is given to U.S. citizens. Folks, because of the limited funding, TSAC is still unable to award all U.S. citizens who are otherwise eligible. Therefore, again, only citizens will be eligible for TSCA. In other words, our green card holders, even though they get HOPE, they get Promise, they get Pell, they won't receive TSCA because, again, that priority that's written into statute for that program. So, again, awarding will begin hopefully in the next week or two. So students should then begin seeing their statuses change within the TSAC student portal. And secondly, students must be U.S. citizens for that. And again, priority was granted for a student that had an eligible EFC on or prior to February 1st. That point being, if a student, like some of these blank EFCs, let's say as of February the 26th, they've returned to FAFSA, they've made a correction, and now they've gone from a blank EFC to where their EFC is say, 1,500. So they'll be in that eligible pending funds availability status, and they'll remain in it until we determine whether or not how far we can award out potentially past, February 1st. So as a reminder, eligibility is based upon when that eligible EFC was determined. So the initial awarding is going to be based upon any student that has a 0 to 21 degree EFC that was calculated on or prior to their FAFSA being submitted on February the 1st. The other thing to go into, here we are late February. Guys, we are slowly winding down, obviously, another academic year, and kind of a reminder that GPA entry for HOPE, for GAMS, for HOPE access purposes, that's on the horizon, right? That's what you do once you have final GPAs calculated in May, upon or after graduation of these high school seniors. As a reminder, I assume many of you, if not all of you, are probably on here from a public school perspective. Per the rule that governs our lottery programs, the GPA that's entered and used for HOPE and GAMS and HOPE access eligibility must adhere to the uniform grading policy that began back in 2006, right? And that was created by the State Board of Education. Depending on you, the school district, right? Some of my larger school districts, I know Ms. Connie's on here from Metro. Ms. Connie knows that in Metro, the unweighted GPA here in Metro is what adheres to the uniform grading policy. So that's ultimately what she will be communicating for her students in determining their eligibility for HOPE, GAMS, and HOPE access. In other communities, you may only have one GPA, which may be a GPA that adheres to the uniform grading policy. Guys, that's what you will be reporting. But that's just again a reminder about the upcoming GPA entry season. Before we get into the ways that you can update GPAs, I just want to give a quick shout out to our HOPE Access Grant. I recently was asked, and I'm always honored to be asked to speak to the First Tennessee Counselor Collaborative up. It was in Greenville for the First Tennessee counties that are in that collaborative, and I was asked to do a presentation about our HOPE scholarships. And it was like, Jason, we've heard so much about promise. I want to make sure our school administrators and counselors are still up on everything they need to know about the HOPE scholarship. We might want to do that webinar at some point soon because this is what I do. But this is one thing I talked about the Hope Access Grant, and many of the counselors in that room that again, all you guys that do this work are all you're the best. But sometimes, if we're not working with something day in and day out, we forget things. And like a lot of counselors had forgotten about this Hope Access Grant. And as a reminder, for Hope Access Grant eligibility, a student who is not eligible for Hope, and that's the key, who's not eligible for the Hope Scholarship, may qualify for the Hope Access Grant, but they've got to meet 3 requirements. That student has to have an 18, 19, or 20 ACT, or whatever the SAT equivalent is for an 18, 19, 20. And they must graduate from your high school with a 2.75 to 2.99 GPA, and their parents' adjusted gross income per their FAFSA must be $36,000 or less. If they satisfy all 3 requirements, they will be eligible for the Hope Access Grant. Hope Access Grant is a non-renewable award for the first 24 attempted hours that the student attempts. At that point in time, if the student has earned a 2.75 college GPA or better after attempting 24 hours after high school graduation and college, then that student will then, quote-unquote, become eligible for the Hope Scholarship at that point in time. And a lot of the counselors, Marinelle, that day were like, we totally had forgotten about the Hope Access Grant. So for those of you that sometimes have questions, Jason, why am I having to enter GPAs for students that are below a 3.0? It's because of this potential Hope Access Grant eligibility, right? Because some of these students might qualify for it. Marinelle, we got a question?
We do have a question. So the question is, can a student be Hope Access eligible and Aspire eligible?
No. Joe, this is a great question. So Hope Access is Joe, think of it this way. Hope Access is the half award of a Hope with Aspire award, okay? So my point is like you're either Hope Access eligible, okay? Or if you're Hope eligible and you have that $36,000 or less income, then you are eligible for Aspire. So again, two stand alone. So Hope Access, if you're Hope Access eligible, that's all you can get for those, say, first 24 hours. And then once you have a 2.75 GPA, you'll then become eligible for the Hope Scholarship. And if you then still have an adjusted gross income of less than $36,000 or your parents, then you will also get the Aspire award at that point in time. So again, Hope and Aspire are connected, and then Hope Access is standalone. So again, if you're Hope Access eligible, you won't get Aspire because to get to Aspire, you have to be first and foremost Hope eligible. Good question, Joe. The other slide is about GPA entries. So again, as a reminder, when it comes to mid-May, late May, early June, what are a school's options for reporting GPAs for Hope, GAMS, Hope Access purposes? You've got 2 options. First, the manual entry of GPAs through eGrants. That's what, since this program started in 2004, that's what all schools at least initially did, was they manually entered GPAs through eGrants. So again, for the system, eGrants, that part of the system will open up on May 15th for counselors to begin entering GPAs if they so choose to go this route. Again, as a reminder, you need to report the final cumulative GPA for these students. Any questions or for any assistance with the eGrants, with GPA entries through eGrants, please contact your TSEC outreach specialist. And then the second option is through the Tennessee Electronic Transcript Exchange. And many of our schools and school districts, and I know Suzette, I'm pretty sure, is still on this webinar, but Suzette's done a wonderful job for us in trying to get the word out about this Tennessee Electronic Transcript Exchange. For those of you that have known me for years, this is what replaced the quote-unquote ZAP that some of you used back in the day, but this is the new electronic version for option for counselors to report their GPAs to TSAC. Suzette Telly is the contact for more information regarding the Tennessee Electronic Transcript Exchange. on this slide, you see her email address and her phone number. You know, if you, your school would like more information about all the, I'm going to say maybe the advantages or perks of maybe using electronic transcript exchange beyond just for Hope Scholarship purposes, Suzette's the person to contact to learn more about that system. So there are your two options to enter GPAs.
So we do have a question about entering GPAs, just a point of clarification. They should list the student's unweighted GPA and not the weighted GPA.
They should, and something that I hope that maybe in a subsequent webinar that we do, I hope to have a screenshot for you showing the new eGrants were finally, what's happening right now, folks, is if you log into eGrants right now and you click on your verify screen, you will see two columns, among other columns. You'll see a verify column and, you will see a unweighted GPA column and a weighted GPA column. What we're working at right now is we are removing the weighted column from that screen, and we're going to rename the column that remains basically the uniform grading policy GPA or whatever. So in other words, the question that was posed again, yes, if the unweighted GPA that you use within your school adheres to uniform grading policy, that's what you should report through eGrants or through the Tennessee Electronic Transcript Exchange, and only that email, that GPA. Yes.
That's all my question.
Oh, okay. So we've got 3 minutes. We may have some more questions right now, but in our last 3 minutes here, you'll see the outreach division slide that shows all the outreach contacts. And for one of the first times recently, I finally updated this version to include Jonathan, who's been a wonderful addition to our team and our family here at the agency and here for you guys out in the state. But anyways, feel free to contact any of us with any questions that you may have from a state aid perspective, stuff like that. That said, one thing I do want to share with all of you, and as we're giving this webinar about blank EFCs, one thing that we are that I've asked the team, and this includes yours truly, to do, looking at different reports about blank EFCs, is we will be contacting some of you potentially about potentially doing a FAFSA follow-up workshop where we offer to these students and parents that, hey, you know, Jason Seay will be at this school from this time to this time to assist with FAFSA correction. And what we're trying to do, guys, is get these workshops aligned with the mandatory meeting for Tennessee Promise purposes. So, for example, next Tuesday, I'm going to be at McGavock High School 2 hours before their mandatory meeting, helping any of those McGavock High School students that have FAFSA corrections that need to be made. And we at TSAC are going to be emailing and texting those students and their parents to let them know that they have a FAFSA issue, and that I'm going to be there between, like 3:30 and 5:30 assisting students and parents with these corrections. So that's something that my team is doing right now, and you may have received an email or call from them to potentially schedule something like this. As you hear this, if this is something that might interest you, and you'd be like, oh, I'd love for someone to come out and help, I mean, give your outreach specialist a call, and again, if we're available, we'd love to help any school with this, just to help these kids get across the finish line.
We did have one question from earlier that I said we would revisit.
Okay.
Can you show one more time how to access eGrants?
Okay.
The counselor?
Yeah. So go back, Marinelle. We're going to go back to the very beginning, and it starts right here by going to tn.gov/collegepace. So that is our, the financial aid arm of TEC and TSAC. That's what that website's for. When you go to that website, if you scroll all the way down to the bottom of the page under important links, you will see eGrants User Access. So you will click on that, which will get to this screen where you will log in at this point in time. Marinelle, this is probably a good thing to remind them because I forgot to earlier. Folks, as a reminder, with eGrants, you must be using Internet Explorer. If you're trying to access it with Chrome or Edge, I cannot guarantee that you will have success getting to where you need to get to within eGrants, to the reports or to the GPA spots or whatever. So that's how you access eGrants. And again, once you log in, this is what you'll see once you log in, where you have the option to look at your reports. The verify list is what I just mentioned about GPA entries and stuff like that. So if you have questions, by all means, contact your TSAC outreach specialist. And again, for some of you, if you're a new counselor and you happen to get on this distribution list last week that Marinelle sent out, and you're like, Jason, I don't have eGrants access. Again, email me or a TSAC outreach specialist, and we will send you the one pager that you have to fill out, and along with your principal to sign it to get you access for your school eGrants. So I think that answers that.
Yeah. So I think that's it. We haven't had any more questions typed in. We do have a couple people that are going to follow up with you about specific student questions. But thank you guys so much for joining us today. I think this has been great. And like I said, we will record the webinar, and we will also post it on the FAFSA Frenzy webpage. So thank you guys so much.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.